Weak is he who allows his actions to be controlled by his emotions, and strong is he who forces his actions to control his emotions. If you're not consciously doing the latter, then you're unconsciously doing the former. Welcome to Lesson Beta. So welcome back. This is Lesson 2, The Stoic Trader. In this lesson, you're going to experience the power of the practice of Stoicism. Okay, I'm going to take you through the principles, the philosophy, the lessons, and a meditative practice. Now, that's going to help you develop a coping mechanism. It's going to help you understand, the real type of happiness, something that's not driven by externalities and something that you can use in many different situations. And it's also going to help you understand reality and objectivity. Again, as a consequence, I'm not saying you have to adopt Stoicism, but what I'm saying is if you do not have a set of governing, life-governing principles, ultimately your perception is controlled by externalities and emotion. However, if you're willing to go further into the practice of Stoicism, it will unlock enlightenment. It will unlock wisdom and understanding. It will unlock a sense of calm. Let's move on now with Stoicism. Okay, so the history. Very brief. I'm not here to go back into history and give you a history lesson. And by no means is my understanding of Stoicism and the history of it, conclusive. I've been, exploring the principle and philosophy of Stoicism for over 2 years now. And I want to take you through my understanding of it, how it aids my trading, but also some practical, tools that you can use, as part of your daily life. So the history of and philosophy of Stoicism, 3rd century BC. All right. The reason I've included this is to give you an understanding of how long ago this actually started. Right. More importantly, these principles have survived the test of time. Right. They've been around for thousands of years, and it was originally founded by Zeno of Citium. Now, what I like about Stoicism is it's a philosophy informed by logic, objectivity, and realism. Now, for most of you that have, done one of my courses or known me over the years, I love objectivity. I love the facts. I love seeing things for what they are rather than, what my mind tries to conjure up. So philosophy is ultimately informed by logic, by objectivity, and by realism. Now, the concept in a nutshell, and we'll go through these principles in one of the next slides, but ultimately what Stoicism is trying to achieve is happiness. That's all it is. It's a set of principles which are control, understanding, and actions. And ultimately, it's about doing those 3 things correctly in the right way that will unlock happiness, also known as enlightenment. Now, the reason I've included that enlightenment around is because a lot of you that have maybe read up about Buddhism, right, follows this similar kind of approach. Again, both Buddhism and Stoicism have been around for thousands of years already. Now, one thing that Stoicism is really strong about is that actions above words, right? It's that concept of actions speak louder than words. You cannot just read Stoicism and expect to be stoic or happy. It doesn't work that way. It's about the practice of the philosophy. Now, philosophy is a calling. Okay, it's a way of living. It's habitual. It's something you do day in, day out. It's a lifestyle. Epictetus said, we can't just talk about it. We have to embody it. All knowing is not the same as embodiment. Now, you would have heard me talk about this in lesson 1, which is understanding something is not the same as adopting it, right? And this is where that understanding comes from, that's where I've developed that understanding is you can know all the theory, you can have read all the knowledge about it, but that doesn't mean you embody it. And again, I'm going to show you how to embody it, just like I showed you in lesson 1, how you can develop, your understanding. I'm going to show you practically again how you can develop Stoicism and practically apply it to your life. Now, we get philosophy wrong when we focus too much on what philosophers say. It's about our actions, and this is important. So often we find ourselves quoting, famous people or these wonderful quote lines of buy low, sell high. Okay, we've heard that so many times. But how often do you buy low and sell high? Right? That's the reality. Knowing is not the same as embodying. It's about the actions we take. And again, I'm going to show you those actions as we move to the practical part of lesson 2. Now, why are we learning about Stoicism? Very good question. Okay, a lot of you are probably sat there going, well, what on earth has this got to do with trading? And that's an important question. So my question to you is, as I'm going through this lesson, I want you to try and relate this to trading. I want you to try and find actually, yes, this makes sense to me as a trader. Okay, but it doesn't just have to make sense as a trader. Maybe it has to make sense as an individual, right? Remember, I'm not just trying to teach you a course about trading. I'm trying to give you a course that gives you, the practicalities for life. Why? Because at the end of the day, your trading is going to be impacted by everything that goes on in your life. So, Stoicism is a tool, okay? This is the reality. You're going to learn about it because Stoicism is a tool, like any tool, right? It's a set of guiding principles, or truths, as we like to think of them. Now, when you use this tool and you apply the principles, you're ultimately going to find happiness, okay? So it's a simple formula. Know what the principles are, apply those principles day in, day out, and ultimately you'll unlock the doors. Okay, that should sound familiar again. We dealt with that in lesson 1. Now, what you must remember about Stoicism is that our perception of events is ultimately what creates unhappiness. Now, this is crucial because we're going to talk about controlling the controllables a lot throughout this course. So, if ultimately our perception is what dictates our happiness or unhappiness, then I'm going to teach you a way to control that perception. Again, in this lesson, I'm going to give you some practical mechanisms, but throughout this course, I'm going to teach you to control the controllables. Now, Stoicism develops perception over time. Okay, this is not a practice where you're going to do one meditation with Brannigan and suddenly, you're an enlightened individual. It doesn't work that way. All right? It's a practice over time, and it's a consistent application. And again, you're going to hear me use that word for the next 24 lessons all the time. It's about consistency, right? If you apply it consistent over a period of time, ultimately you'll get to the end point of Stoicism. But now here's the catch. Stoicism is not a journey. Stoicism is a journey. It's not a destination. There is no end point to Stoicism. You're not trying to achieve a goal here. You're just trying to go on an enlightened journey. And that's what Stoicism is about. Okay? It's about developing a set of principles that allow you to live a better, more fulfilling life. That allows you to see things in a different way. Now, how is it relevant to trading? Okay? Well, the reality is the financial markets are a random set of events driven by uncontrollable forces. Okay, so can you relate to that all of a sudden? There's so many uncontrollables within trading, so many externalities. So how can we control our mindset, our decision making, our approach when there's so many uncontrollables? Well, it's about creating tools. It's about creating a set of principles, a set of processes to ultimately control the controllables. Okay? We create our own underlying principles to follow and rules to adhere. In other words, once you have a good foundation and understanding of trading, you start to develop your own tools, your own principles by which you follow. Okay? Through practice and experience, we develop deeper understanding and perception. Again, we're going to be doing a lot of practice of the fundamentals, of the principles, of the strategies, of utilizing the tools. Through this practice, okay, you're going to develop the understanding and perception to control the controllables. And lastly, again, trading is a process of continuous evolution. There is no end point. We spoke about it on the timelines. Yes, it takes the average trader 10 years to get to a benchmark called elite trader. Right? But that's not the end point. That for some is the beginning of a new journey. Right? And that's the reality. Just like Stoicism, trading is a continuous development process. Now, there are 3 key disciplines of Stoicism. Right? if I'm going to sort of highlight Stoicism in a nutshell, and that's what I've tried to do in this lesson, I'm giving you thousands and thousands of pages of context in a couple of slides here. But I want you to understand the basic premise of it, try and understand the power and potential of it, and see if you want to adopt it to your trading, to your daily routine. Now, there's 3 principles that underline Stoicism. Number 1, the discipline of perception. Okay? So how do we see and interpret things? Discipline number 2, the discipline of action. And this is ultimately the decisions we take on a day-to-day basis. And discipline number 3 is the discipline of will. How do we deal with things we cannot change? So these are the 3 disciplines ultimately you want to adopt in order to adopt some form of Stoic philosophy. Okay? Now I'm going to give you a couple of practical lessons with regards to each one of these disciplines. Right? Some really lessons that you'll be able to relate to and say, well, actually, yes, this is something I need to understand further. This is a discipline that I need to adopt. Now, again, like I said to you, if someone comes to you and they want to cue you on what is your understanding of Stoicism, there it is right there. Okay, there it is in a summary, in a nutshell. Stoicism is the ability to control your perceptions, direct your actions thoughtfully, and willingly accept what is out of your control. Right? That's what you're doing with Stoicism. That's why I adopt it. That's why thousands and millions of people around the world adopt it. That's why it's been around for centuries. It's because we're trying to learn to control our perceptions. We're trying to understand how we can direct our actions in a thoughtful way. And we want to willingly choose. So we want to choose between things that are in our control and out of our control. Okay? Now, how are we going to do that? Well, it's simple. I'm going to show you some practical meditations, and I'm going to show you some written meditations. I'm going to take you through the process of meditation. Okay, we are literally going to practice meditation together. I'm then going to get you to go practice it on your own. Just try it, okay? And I want you for yourself to determine whether or not there is some form of value add when it comes to meditation. Now, we're going to go through 8 lessons, okay? We're going to have a look at some of the most important aspects of Stoicism. Now, what I will tell you, remember what I said, this is not by any means a conclusive Stoic, sort of summary. I'm just trying to take the most relevant parts, make sure that you can relate to it as a trader and an individual, keep it ultimately very simplified, because I want you to see the power of Stoicism as I saw it 2 years ago. Okay, so lesson number 1. The single most important practice in Stoic philosophy is differentiating between what we can change and what we can't. Acceptance isn't passive. It's the first step in an active process towards self-improvement. In other words, a lot of us seem to just take things as they come. We accept them as they are. But the reality is acceptance isn't a passive, it isn't a passive thing. It's something you actually have to actively do something about, right? And that's what meditation is. It's an active process of understanding and accepting. There's a wonderful thought, which is a love of fate's choices. This is ultimately the action, the active process is that you want to formulate a love of fate's choices, both good and bad. Okay, so day to day, good and bad things are happening. Now, if you can learn to love all of fate's outcomes, you're becoming more stoic in nature. So, how do we differentiate? Well, it comes down to reflection and understanding. Okay, so how do we differentiate between what we can and can't change? Well, reflection and understanding. If you take all the things in a day and you look at them one by one, you'll recognize straight away. You'll say, well, that was out of my control. That trade was out of my control. That, comment that stopped me out, that was out of my control. But that stop loss I moved, that was in my control. Okay, the moment you start to reflect, you'll start to develop the understanding. Okay, and that's what Stoicism is about. It's about learning to differentiate between what you can change and what you can't. What you can't and what you can change, love it either way because it's fate's choice for you. That's lesson number 1. Now, lesson number 2. You don't control the situation, but you control what you think about it. Okay, this comes down to one of those disciplines, the discipline of perception. Right? Whoever we are, wherever we are, what matters is our choices. What are they? How we evaluate them, and how will we make the most of them? Whoever we are, that's a repeat. Your attention is one of your most critical resources. Now, when we move on to the meditative side, I'm going to give you a few very important cues that you must adhere to. Okay? Why? Because nowadays, in the 21st century, we are so easily distracted. Trust me, I struggle with it day to day. Even after having done this, the meditation routines I'm going to show you for 2 years now, I still struggle with having my attention stolen from me. So again, I've developed practical ways to try and mitigate this. Okay, I still get distracted, but I found a way to become better at being distracted. And some of those distractions, think of your phone, think of social media. All right, remember, your attention is one of your most critical resources. Don't give it away cheaply. So again, what we're going to do is, as we go through this course, is I'm going to help you develop a process for decision making, both pre-decision and both post-decision. And again, we're going to do this with various tools. Okay, you don't control the situation, but you control what you think about it. With these tools, ultimately, you're going to be able to control your decision making. Lesson number 3. Education, reading and meditating on the wisdom of great minds is not to be done for its own sake. It has a purpose. Okay? There is a reason that I'm reading Stoicism. There's a reason I go to yoga. There's a reason I follow Buddhist practice. Right? It's not because I'm going in search of a deeper meaning necessarily. Right? It's because it adds a value, it adds a level of understanding for me. Right? If these things have been around for centuries and they've probably given, enlightenment and happiness to millions and millions of people over the years, why would it be any different now? Okay? Knowledge, self-knowledge in particular, is freedom. Okay? The more knowledge and understanding you have, ultimately, the more freedom you have. Why? Because your emotions, your perception is not being given to you by the externalities. You are choosing it. You're making a choice as to what you ultimately want and how you want to interpret things. Now, when reading and learning, make sure you're prioritizing quality over quantity. Okay, this is one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you as you go through this course. There is going to be a ton of information. So many different little pieces of gold. You're going to be writing down so many thousands of things over the period of this course. The reality is, right, some of it will be of a higher quality to you than other. And the important thing is to prioritize. Right? Don't try and think you're going to be able to absorb everything within this course in a space of 6 months. Okay? It's taken me 10 years to get to this point. Why should it take you any different? All right? One of the tools I am going to give you is a trading calendar. This is going to help you prioritize quality over quantity. Now, ultimately what it comes down to is, with all this education and reading and text and knowledge, it all comes down to understanding, experience, wisdom. Okay? We go through multiple different experiences, we try and understand them, and over time we're developing wisdom. That's how it works. Just like we spoke about in lesson 1, we spoke about in lesson 2, and we're going to speak about throughout this course. It's about understanding something, going through the experiences, adopting it, and it becomes wisdom. Now, lesson number 4. What we desire makes us vulnerable. And again, hopefully a lot of you can relate to this, because our desires ultimately drive our decision-making processes. Okay, very often they drive our decision-making processes beyond our Stoic foundations or our Stoic philosophies or our principles that we've adopted. Right? It's easy to act. Anyone can act. Right? You just jump in, you just dive in, and you react. It's harder to stop, to pause, to think. And that's something you read. That's very, very profound, but most of you can relate to that. How easy it is just to impulse trade the market. Or you hear something, someone says something, and bang, suddenly you want to trade. Right? What's a lot harder is to actually stop, pause, think. Right? Now, some of the things that that I like to think about when it comes to this whole desire, our desires make us vulnerable, is the concepts of materialism and consumerism and egotism. Right? These are very real parts of who we are, and we have to recognize that these, materialism and consumerism and egotism ultimately is driving our decision-making process. Now, why this is important is you're going to get tested multiple times as you start to develop the concept of Stoicism and your own principles. Those principles are going to be tested because of materialism, because of your desires to consume, because of your natural tendencies to have an ego. And the important thing is to understand when you're veering from those principles and not adhering to your principles. Okay? And that's, again, what the meditation's for. Lesson number 5. We underestimate our capabilities just as much and just as dangerously as we overestimate other abilities. What do I mean by this? Okay, think about it for a second. We sometimes underestimate ourselves, how good we can be, how much potential we have. But we don't just do that, for any other reason, but because things get tough, things get hard, and suddenly we start to think we're not worthy, we're not good enough. But the reality is you are good enough, right? And the same goes without saying that very often we overestimating other people's abilities, right? You might be listening to me thinking, wow, Brannigan's really, he's got this all tuned down. He really understands things. He's really, moving in the right direction. Well, the simple reality is don't overestimate me. Okay, I'm no different to you. We are all the same. All right, we're just on a different part of our journey. That's the only difference. So never overestimate anyone else. Equally, don't underestimate yourself. All right? Cultivate the ability to judge yourself accurately and honestly. Look inward to discern what you're capable of and what it will take to unlock that potential. So to be rational, we have to do 3 things. First, we must look inward. Next, we must examine ourselves critically. Finally, we must make our decisions uninhibited by biases or popular notions. What does this come down to? What is this quote about and this, this idea of, to be rational? Well, it all comes down to honest self-reflection. One of the hardest things you and I will always struggle with. How can we be 100% honest with ourselves and with those around us? Right? Trading is one of those unfortunate attributes that makes us look or forces us to look deeply within ourselves. If you're not honest with yourself, the reality is you're always going to be stumbling until the point that you recognize that honesty is ultimately unlocking that door. Now, lesson number 6. One becomes a philosopher when they begin to exercise their guiding reason and start to question the emotions and beliefs and even language that others take for granted. Okay? So what we mean by this, again, is that understanding is not the same as adopting. Right? You do not judge someone as a philosopher by what they say, but rather how they act. Today, not tomorrow, is the day that we can start to be good. Right? How often do we hear ourselves saying, well, I'll do that debrief tomorrow. I'll try that new trade strategy tomorrow. I'll do that backtest tomorrow or this weekend or next month. Right? What it comes down to is, again, remember that 5-minute promise. Just start. The hardest thing is always going to be just the start. Once you start, you'll start rolling with it. The creative juices will start to flow. Right? And this all comes down to that one word, attitude. Okay? Get at it. The sooner you get at it, the sooner you're going to start progressing and moving. Lesson number 7. How you handle even minor adversity might seem like nothing, but in fact it reveals everything. Now, this is one that's quite personal to me, and it's something that I've learned the hard way. But it's extremely fulfilling. It almost gives me a great sense of achievement. And I like to think of this as judge yourself on actions and attitude. Okay, judge your personal self on your actions and your attitude. What do you do after a really tough day in the markets? What do you do after being stopped out? What do you do after making those careless, stupid mistakes that you've repeated for years? Right? Well, I'll tell you what I do. I used to take the next day off. I used to shy away. I used to be afraid. Now, I get up the exact same time the next morning. I get into the office the exact same time and I face my fears. Right? I have the right attitude. I get straight back at it because the reality is, like I said to you earlier, acceptance is not something that's passive. You don't just accept it. Right? Acceptance is something that requires action. Right? You have to action it to start to accept it, understand it, and move forward ultimately. Right? And that's what we're talking about here. Get up that next day, show the right attitude, get going again, because the sooner you get going, the sooner you start moving forward. Now, when you catch an elbow or an unfair blow today, shake off the pain and remind yourself, I'm learning. And I love this quote. It's absolutely fantastic. And what it's saying is, guess what? You're going to get knocked down, okay? I get knocked down and I get up again. You all know that song, yeah? You're going to get knocked down time and time and time again. The reality is, you've just got to get up and accept that you're learning, all right? It's one of those crazy things you say to someone where you say, look, let me just punch you in the face, but you're going to learn. And most people will look at you with crazy eyes going, you're mad, right? But Mike Tyson, you all know Mike, okay? Big Mike, greatest boxer of all time, right? He was asked, how can you become a professional? How did you become the greatest boxer? And he said, well, I truly believe that I needed to find a way to get punched 1,000 times. And the guy looked at him, the interviewer said, well, why? How does that make sense? He said, well, because the sooner I can get punched 1,000 times in the face, the sooner I'm going to learn how not to get punched in the face. Right? And that's what we're trying to say here, is that ultimately you're going to fail. You're going to get knocked down. But the more you can fail, the more you can get knocked down, the quicker you're going to experience, learn, understand, and become wiser for it. Right? So look at the pain, look at the frustration as learning, as opportunity for growth. Lesson number 8, our final lesson. Our pursuit should be aimed at progress, however little that it's possible for us to make. Let me repeat that. Our pursuit should be aimed at progress, however little that it's possible for us to make. In other words, you always want to be in constant pursuit of progress. Why? Progression is never ending, okay? And I spoke about this in lesson 1. It's my driver, okay? I'm driven purely by progress. It's the reason I do this job as a trader. It's the reason I do Ironman, because I'm in constant pursuit of progression, right? And it never ends. Now, when you become successful at some point, you're going to forget how strong you used to be. And it's another wonderful quote in a sense that what it's trying to tell us is it's warning us. The Stoics knew that the moment someone became successful, that's when they stopped progressing. That's when they stepped into a comfort zone. Okay? And that's when they forgot what the hard times were. It's when they almost became soft. So just be cautious. When success comes to you, that's when you have to start working at it again to reinvent yourself. Right? Don't forget, this journey, whether it's Stoicism, whether it's trading, whether it's life, it's an ongoing pursuit. It's a never-ending pursuit, right? Success is not the end point, right? Success is just another, pillar on our timeline. That's all it is. It's another benchmark that we start to compare ourselves to, right? So that's the end of the 8 lessons of Stoicism, right? These are the lessons you can relate to, hopefully, as traders, because I can relate to them and I've been doing this job for 10 years. So go think about these lessons. Go through them again, one by one. Go through the quotes. What do they mean to you as a trader, as an individual? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. This is the end of part 1, lesson 2. When we come back, we're now going to explore the practical side of Stoicism. Okay, I'm going to teach you to meditate. Right? Through the meditation, you're going to develop understanding. Through the understanding, you're going to learn to adjust your perception of things and ultimately grow wiser for it. All right, we'll see you again in part 2.